Hello, everyone. My name is Sheremeta. This is a joint work with Anya. Actually, I looked through the program. She has 6 or 7 papers here. So I'm sure they're going to see her name a lot more. Also, I want for you to remember that number that Paul just mentioned, 71%. Yeah, that's going to be helpful in my presentation. So here's a motivation. I'm going to give you 2 pictures. And this is I'm from Case Western Reserve University. This is the Weatherhead School of Management. My office is hidden somewhere here. It's a really awkward building, but it's a cool building, you know. One thing that you will notice is that right away here, and that's kind of hard to see, it's a Peter B. Lewis building. That was the biggest donor that donated to the business school, and the building was named after him. Here's another piece you will see in Times Magazine. This was when they ran the story on the biggest philanthropists in the world, and basically Bono was there, also Gates' family was there. And so what this tells you is that people care about recognition, or at least donors are recognized in one way or another, right? So what do we know from research on recognition? So far, we know that recognizing donors by revealing their identity increases their donations. Both if we talk about pure laboratory experiments when people just donate to public goods and benefit others, and also when we talk about charities, when people actually donate money to charity. And so if you recognize all the donors, saying that these are the people that are in the room, this is their names, these are their photos, basically what happens, they give more. Okay? That's what we know so far. Now, what do we know? What we don't know is what kind of recognition is actually more effective. Okay, because there are definitely, you know, in many ways, you cannot sometimes recognize all the people. So, for example, if you have like 10,000 people in an online community contributing to a specific thing, you cannot publish all 10,000 names in one page. So you will have to choose one way or another to restrict that list, or you will have to, people will basically have to incur costs to find out, you know, who are the contributors. So in one way or another, there's different ways that you can recognize contributors, and this is basically the question that we target in this paper. We ask, you know, one way you can just recognize all donors, and this is usually done. Another way, we can do something as the picture with the building, when you recognize the highest donors. So people who donated the most, the building is going to be named after them. Or you can do something crazy like this. You can attempt to shame them. Those who did not contribute, you're going to publicize them. You're going to publish their names in the local newspaper. Sounds like a crazy idea. It's been done already by 2 Ivy universities, and they were basically publicizing the list of alumni that did not give anything for the past year. It created quite a debate. I actually have some of those conversations saved just because it kind of gives you an idea how, you know, that this is actually can be a big pushback, you know, from a lot of people. And this is actually what we're going to do. So let me just give you an idea. What are we going to do? We're going to look at these 3 different ways of recognizing donors. And we will see how this kind of recognition impacts their giving. So, but as an economist, we always try to come up with predictions, right? Hypotheses. What should we expect in this environment to happen? Well, I'm not going to present any fancy formulas here, but I'm going to just present a couple things here. So if you think about recognizing all the donors at the same time, what we already know from previous results is that when you recognize all the donors, they should donate more. Donations should be higher than donations when you don't recognize any donors. Yes?
So just a comment. So we have a paper that shows that when you recognize donors, they give more when they think others are also giving more, but they actually give less when they think that others are giving more.
So it's conditional.
It's a conditional.
Okay, it's possible. I haven't seen that paper, but the general consensus, you know, that this would be the case. And the reason is, again, there can be different reasons. So, right, maybe one is based on expectations. You know, another reason can be, well, people are driven by their social image. They want to be perceived as, look at me, you know, I've donated so much. Or it can be a quest to be a role model, and Lise has done some theoretical work with that. So basically, these are the theoretical reasons why should we expect for people to give more when they are recognized. Now, what happens when you recognize only the highest donors? Now, this is interesting because what it says is that you're going to ignore the big part of the donors population, and you're going to really elevate just these biggest donors. And they're going to be the most visible. So basically what you do, in a sense, you're creating some kind of competition within this charity, right? Because now if you want to signal your donation, you're going to signal your status, what do you need to do? You need to beat all the other competitors for your name to be at the top of the list. You know, you're going to publish the list of only top 10 donors, or you're going to name the building after the biggest donor. So it creates this kind of competitive incentive, and if people care about prestige, if they do care about it, which we know they do, then when you recognize even the highest donors, that should be better than not recognizing them at all. Now let's move one step further and say like, okay, what if you do recognize only the lowest donors? Now again, you're creating this competitive incentive on the lower tail. Now what you do basically, you're saying, if you're the worst contributor to this charity, your names are going to be publicized. You're going to be shamed. And again, because of that shame aversion that people don't want to be shamed in general, they want to feel prestige, but they don't want to feel shame, that should again shift the contributions and increase the contributions. Does this make sense? So this is the logic why we should expect all sorts of recognitions to matter. Now, we did this experiment, so we did a randomized field study here in Chicago, and we had a group of parents coming to the preschool program that John is running with Anya and with other colleagues. And so we had parents come, and they were involved in other sorts of tasks. And so at one point of time, we invited them into the room, and we said, okay, guys, now we will ask you to donate to the Red Cross. And we gave them additional amount of money. Basically, we didn't have $100 bills, but we gave them $10 extra. And they were deciding they're not millionaires. In fact, they were mostly drawn from the poor population side. So $10 was a good enough amount of money for them. And so they had to donate out of that amount to the American Red Cross. Now, what were the manipulations? And that's the treatments that we used here. So the no recognition treatment is basically, we just put on the board all of their donations. So just the amounts, you know, $10, $10, $5, $6, $7, and we ranked them actually. So it was more in the order. In the full recognition, what we did, we also publicized who donated them. So we would say, Paul has donated generously $10. You know, and they knew that their names are going to be exposed, so that people will know how much they contributed. So that's the full recognition. In the positive recognition, what we did, we chose only the top 2 contributors. So all of the donations were displayed, but the top 2 were basically revealed to the group. Here's Paul, he contributed $10, and everybody else contributed these amounts. Okay? Yes?
What did you do if there were ties?
So we were flipping the coin, basically. So the ties were using a flip of the coin. So randomly, choosing randomly, basically. And then in a negative recognition, we had the 2 lowest contributors, or non-contributors, if they didn't contribute anything, and their names would be publicized to the group. Okay? So these are the manipulations. So what do we find? Well, this is actually a pretty high giving rate in our no recognition treatment. So 50% of people, so out of 57% of people on average, out of 57 people on average, people give half of their income or half of their amount that they are given to. So that's a pretty high amount, because remember that 28%, that's the average, and in this setting we find $5. So one explanation can be, well, this is a poor population, so maybe they're more generous than the rest of people. Possible. Another one can be, well, actually we display their donations. So there is some kind of, utility from seeing, your donation being seen by others, although people don't know that it's your donation. But they can be also driving this pretty high number. But the interesting happens once we look at all the rest of the story. And this is getting pretty close to that 70%. So, I think, the millionaires is probably this is the craziest number that I've seen, donating 70% or so. We get it almost there when we have this positive recognition. And so basically what we find is all forms of recognition, they increase donations. Now, the most significant ones are the negative and the positive. So when you shame those who did not contribute, or when you acknowledge the best that contributed. So if you provide these kind of incentives, and again, these are non-monetary incentives, right? These are just completely psychological incentives, or that place the value, of your donation in a non-monetary way. We find these patterns. This is going to give you a little story of what's happening here. Now, these are the distributions. So what we have here is distribution of donation in a no recognition treatment, distribution of donations in a recognition treatment. That's a negative recognition, and that's the positive recognition. Now, what I want to show you here is these two arrows. What it shows basically, if you compare it to this picture when you did not recognize people for their donations, you had a big clump of people over here that are contributing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, once you introduce an incentive saying that, look, these guys are going to have a really good chance of being displayed on the board for everybody to see that they're the lowest contributors, you can see that basically this tail over here moves over here. It doesn't move all over there when they would contribute everything, but it moves over here. So what shame does, it affects this lower tail of the distribution, as you would expect, and it moves all those donations, that the people who would not contribute anything or very little, to kind of moderate contributions. And there is a substantial amount of these people here. You can see that there is a big clumps here, and so they pretty much disappear once you introduce the shame incentive, okay? Now, what happens when you introduce this, you give the top 2 people this extra incentive, basically saying your names are going to be displayed, everybody's going to see. And so what happens, these top donors, that's where the spike happens. So people are trying, and this is, again, this tail is not maybe as impacted, but pretty much people that are like over here, they all move to this side, and they basically pile up on these highest amount of donations, okay? And that's what's happening. So it's completely 2 different mechanisms, but basically recognizing having negative recognition or positive recognitions both bring contributions and donations up, but for 2 very different reasons. One is impacting those low givers, another one is impacting these middle givers that would rather move and be the top givers. Yes?
Roman, the groups you said are from the preschool. Are they interacting, are the people in their group from like the same kids' class?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. We had a questionnaire whether you knew these people in the room, and most of the time they did not. So they don't interact. But again, even if they do, the treatment effects are still there because they're randomly assigned across the treatments. But they don't. Okay? Yeah?
But do you think that because they're part of the preschool community, they feel sort of more warm feelings toward, like, if they knew that the researchers are somehow affiliated with the preschool, that they felt more motivated to do something good and be generous and be recognized for their generosity because of that?
So, I mean, are you talking about this very basic result that we see pretty high donations to begin with? Because I don't see how we would interact necessarily with the treatment effects. Because most of these studies were run by not the direct researchers. So it was not Anya, it was not me, it was not John, it was not anybody. It was mostly students who ran these studies. What's that?
The cost of being recognized as a non-contributor may depend on the fact that this is within a community that you're actively a part of and not. So
you basically would say, okay, I mean, it's a valid point. I think what it just basically you're saying that they're afraid, when they care about prestige, they care that prestige coming not only from seeing by other peers, but also by the experimenter, right? And when they care about shame, they're shamed not only because of their peers seeing them, but also the experimenter. And that's possible.
I'm speaking, I think internal validity is fine. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
about external validity.
Yeah, it's possible. I think maybe the magnitudes in the shifts wouldn't be as dramatic as they are, but I believe it would be in the same direction. Okay? One last thing that I wanted to say here is that we actually had a questionnaire afterwards. And so we asked a bunch of questions, people who participated in this experiment. And so what I do here, I did a regression here for different treatments separately. What you find is that remember, the most significant effects you find for the negative and positive recognition. Okay, those are the treatments that you find the most significant treatment effects. And what you also find that you find a very strong positive correlation here in this case, and weaker in this case. The people who give more or report that they give more to charities on a regular basis, those are the people that respond to our incentives or respond to our treatments the most. Okay? So if they report that I give a lot, on a regular day to different charities, those are also the people that give more in the negative recognition, and they're also give more in the positive recognition. One last thing is that question, it's called the social ladder question. Basically, you are asking people to rank themselves. How do they feel they are ranked in on a social ladder? And basically, the first is the people who are most fortunate. They have the most money. They have the highest education. They have the best jobs. And then the 10 is being the worst education, the worst money, the worst jobs. And how do you feel you fit in this ladder? Okay? And so the people, and that's mostly in the negative recognition, the people who feel worse, they're saying, I'm probably at the bottom of this ladder. They give less. So they maybe have an excuse saying, look, you know what? I'm not as fortunate as the rest of you, so I'm not going to give as much. And that complies with intuition. It doesn't happen in other treatments. It just happens in this shame treatment. Because if you don't give in shame, you better have an excuse why you don't give, because shame is such a powerful incentive. And so you internally may excuse yourself saying, look, I'm not as fortunate as others, and that's why I don't give as much. So basically what we find is that all forms of recognition have a positive impact on donations. But again, this positive and negative recognition gives the most result. And this is kind of interesting because, when you would think, oh, I reveal all the donations, it kind of also implies that I reveal the top donations and the bottom donations, right? Because you kind of basically combine these two mechanisms together. But what's happening here, the interesting part is that when you reveal all the donations, you don't create any extra incentives there. But when you create kind of an internal contest or a tournament amongst the participants, now suddenly things start working even better. Because you're saying only the very top contributors are going to be recognized, or the bottom going to be shamed. That's when things really click and produce the best results. So negative recognition encourages higher donations through discouraging donations that are lower than $5. So again, that's the bottom tail of the distribution, and suggesting that shame is really driving these results. And then when you look at the positive recognition, it encourages these maximum donations. So again, that suggests that it's the prestige that is driving these results. And that's it. That's it for this presentation. I'm right on target, one minute. Yeah?
So at Texas A&M, there was a professor who publicly shamed students online who were cheating, and he got fired. And so I was just wondering, because you were telling in the beginning like that these alumni funds, they are also shaming people. But is it also backfiring to them? Because it seems socially not acceptable.
So I've spoke to a couple of people in this room beforehand, as that we were talking about this. Shame is such a powerful incentive. Unfortunately, it's really hard to implement it in the field, because you cannot just, with alumni, those are the people who cannot back up. They're already alumni. If you graduated from Harvard, you are there. You cannot just say, oh, I don't want to be an alumni of Harvard. But if you talk about the charities that you're actually choosing to participate in, if you know that charity may reveal my donation and that I just gave $1 for the sake of giving something, and then my name is going to be revealed, I'm not going to give that dollar for sure, because I don't want to be on the list of suckers there. So yeah, you're right. You're right that we have to be very careful how we implement these, and especially when shame, it's possible to implement it in the case of alumni association. It might be much more difficult to implement in other contexts. But prestige works as well. So, yeah.
I wonder if after you shame someone publicly, if they're more likely to be a returning annual giver, or if they just give once to be off the list and then...
I do not know that question. I don't know that. That's a good question, but I don't know it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm told we're